Like, we have to remind people that they have agency, that they have some control over their own health. And we're not saying we know any theory or why things form. I just know that it's not bad luck. I know there are things a person can do. Even that means just changing their mindset and how they're enduring this journey.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, we have two very special guests who are going to be talking about a very serious topic, a topic that we have not really gone really in depth on this podcast yet until now, a topic that obviously is something that many people listening right now may have lost someone to cancer. And so we have Maggie and Brad on the line. And Maggie and Brad's life changed when the month she turned 40, Maggie was diagnosed with terminal cancer and received a prognosis of less than a year to live. She's now been cancer-free for 4 years and has dedicated her life to sharing the evidence-based treatments that so dramatically improved her survival and quality of life. Over the course of her healing, Maggie was fortunate enough to establish friendships with the scientists and practitioners changing the cancer paradigm, and has become a prominent voice in the metabolic cancer treatment community, which I'm very interested to learn about myself. I'm sure we'll get into that. She and her filmmaker husband are the force behind an award-winning docuseries featuring some of the leading scientists and practitioners on the metabolic theory of cancer and associated therapies. Brad and Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Talora, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm very interested to hear this information. I know there are so much information out there, so many different theories and processes and ways that people handle it. But let's start by telling, if maybe Maggie, you can share your story.
I would love to. And you really hit the important parts that just a month after turning 40. We had just moved to Hong Kong. We'd lived there for 5 weeks, and I was having problems with my right eye. I was going blind. And when I finally admitted it to Brad that, hey, I can't see anything out my right eye, he finally insisted that I go and I see a doctor there in Hong Kong. And I just started my new job. I was under a lot of stress. And honestly, I'd had a lot of symptoms before that I'd just been ignoring because that's our conventional Western lifestyle, right? You just ignore it till it's critical, you work hard, and you don't disappoint anybody. But when I went into the hospital, the only ophthalmologist who was available on a Sunday took one look in my eye. He didn't say it, but it was clear it was tumors, and he ordered an emergency MRI. That then showed the brain tumors, all of which are metastases from my primary tumor in my left lung. I have non-smokers lung cancer. And what most people don't know is it's becoming increasingly common for women my age in their 30s and 40s to develop these types of lung cancers. It was all new to me. I've definitely embarked on a lot of research, but getting that diagnosis, as you can imagine, is terrifying. And especially once lung cancer spreads to the brain, your prognosis is not good. At the time, the 5-year survival rate was less than 1 year. Less than 1%, which means it rounds to 0. And it was my prognosis, which was less than 1 year. I am really happy to report that after some research just last year, the 5-year survival rate is 4.7%. And I will have survived 5 years in the next week. All of this has been a miracle. It's been a lot of work, a lot of learning, a lot of self-care. I do want to emphasize that at the time, my 6 to 8 month prognosis was based on me using the standard of care, which at the time was only palliative chemotherapy and radiation. I'm so lucky I was inoperable. And they thought this chemotherapy and radiation would help ease my death. And so I took advantage of that. And part of the side effects of this radiation I had to the tumors in my brain is aphasia, this difficulty speaking, which you will hear throughout this conversation. I apologize, but luckily I have Brad, my super caregiver.
Luckily for you and unluckily for the audience.
You sound okay. You sound fine.
Yeah.
So I guess, okay, everyone I'm sure is on the edge of their seats wondering, okay, so what happened next? and we know that you're doing better now. So did you
Spoiler alert, geez.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yes, I am doing incredibly now. It truly is my best life. And as triggering as I know it can be to some people who are struggling with this journey right now, I can say that at the end, I can look back on everything I've been through these past 5 years and say it's been the best experience of my life. Cancer's taught me so much about myself as a person, but it all began with learning about what cancer really is and how our lifestyle can play a role. So I always say the first week after my diagnosis, not even the first 4 days, I was ready to die. I wanted to be a good patient. I wanted to make Brad and my doctors proud. I remember we had a really tearful sushi dinner in Hong Kong saying I've had so much love and so much life already. I was okay with it. And thank God that lasted until the weekend. So I was diagnosed on a Tuesday. Brad took me away for a weekend that weekend. And I started reading books about things like a radical diet change that can lead to what's called radical remissions or unexpected positive outcomes. And I kept reading more and more. And it was that Sunday, I hadn't even been diagnosed with cancer for a week, that I told Brad, I'm just going to try a fast. I'm going to try 24 hours and we'll see. I also decided then that I wasn't going to drink alcohol anymore. It was something that I had turned to during my stressful life, and I saw it wasn't healing to me. So we did that first 24 hours, which I realize now wasn't much, but it was hard at the time. And I decided that I wasn't going to put anything back into my body after that wasn't actively healing. I wasn't going to eat anything where I couldn't find a publication on PubMed saying that it either reduced inflammation, would actively kill cancer cells in the petri dish, or there was one other criteria that I had. And so I sent poor Brad on the streets of our new home in Hong Kong, searching for organic food, broccoli sprouts, like everything, just nuts. And so I'm also fortunate that I was helped in this way of eating by my traditional treatment. Things like chemotherapy and radiation left me so I really couldn't eat much at all. It was just a lot of sweating and vomiting. And I started to lose weight, like serious. I lost over 30 pounds in the first 3 months. And all my doctors thought, oh, well, that's cancer. She's just dying. That's what we would expect. Because cachexia is one of the biggest killers of cancer patients, that loss of muscle weight. Well, what I realized, and I actually got a DEXA scan to confirm, is that my weight loss wasn't the muscle mass, it was my fat. And I had been learning throughout the course of my initial healing about the metabolic theory of cancer and associated therapies. And one of the things the metabolic theory talks about is that sugar is a great fuel for cancer. And this is absolutely known and evident because if you think about it, the definitive diagnostic for cancer is a PET scan, a PET CT. And so what a PET scan does is it injects the body with a radioactive glucose source, sugar, and all that sugar travels straight to the tumors, and then it gets imaged with that radioactive tracer. And that's a fact. That's been a thing since the 80s. And so if we know that sugar goes directly to tumors, especially late stage tumors, it's like, why would I want to give more of that to my cancer if it's obviously having a good time eating that? Especially when I know my body doesn't need a ton of sugar to function. In fact, my cells, my healthy cells, in times prefer something called ketones, which are created by a ketogenic state. And I know, no, I'm talking a ton, but a ketogenic state should be differentiated from the keto fat diet that we hear about so much. A ketogenic state is just one where your body's creating these healthy ketones that can be used as signaling molecules and fuel. And it can be accessed by any kind of diet. You can be fasting, you could be carnivore, you could be vegan keto. I actually was plant-based for the year of my healing. But there's no right or wrong way. It's whatever is right for your genetics, your epigenetics, your type of cancer, your lifestyle, your upbringing. We're not advocating any particular diet, but it is becoming a fact that these ketones, this ketogenic state, can be really beneficial to cancer outcomes by, in some cases, prolonging survival, like mine, by reducing the side effects of conventional medication or treatment like radiation or chemo, And then above all, just improving quality of life. And that is something that is being documented more and more every day. And we're so happy to be a part of it.
And even making treatments more effective by allowing people to have lower doses as well, because your normal cells kind of hibernate a little bit when you're in ketosis, and your cancer cells don't do that. So it allows the cancer cells to kind of get hit a little bit extra when you're in ketosis. So.
Very interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I have also heard, I can't remember exactly where, but I did hear that, cancer cells in a petri dish, when you feed them sugar, that they grow more than almost any other, substance. So it's like, okay, that. And we've kind of known this anyway, right? Like everyone knows sugar's bad for you. We know that these same things, right? That I've spoken about on this podcast many times, how I kind of healed myself and lowered the massive inflammation that I had in my fingers, hands, and arms was really when I realized inflammation comes from what I put inside my body. And therefore, when that finally clicked for me, it was like, okay, so what is a low inflammatory diet? What are foods that can lower inflammation in my body? Because pretty much every major disease stems from inflammation. A lot of the pains that people go through, whether it be even simple things like shoulder pain, knee pain, back pain, many surgeries could potentially be avoided if people just first tried to actually lower inflammation in their body, potentially. So I think it's something very important. And it's very interesting because I actually know someone at the moment who, eats quite a bit of sugar, got diagnosed with cancer, and is still actually not changed their diet. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very important message, because this is such a common, disease that many people get. Number one, we'd love to hear maybe a little bit about how we can avoid getting it in the first place, potentially, as well as the best ways to treat it, which we're starting to kind of get into based on your last comments.
Yes.
I just make one comment and then you can answer. I just wanted to note, because you mentioned inflammation. There's quite a few cancer thrivers, people that have gone through this process, and they remark how not only does it help them with their cancer diagnosis, but it also gets rid of a lot of inflammatory things that they have going on in their body. Certainly, cancer seems to affect people when they get older. So we talked to several women who had sort of a varicose vein or something like that, and that clears up, or arthritis in their hands, and that clears up. And this isn't anything that they were trying to target at all. They went on a ketogenic diet to try and help, support their standard of care, or even without standard of care, as a way to work on their cancer. And they got these amazing side effects. So I just feel like that's worth mentioning. You're right on with inflammation for sure.
And to your question of prevention, I am so lucky that I was so far gone when I discovered this way of eating, because I don't know if I would have changed my lifestyle so dramatically if it hadn't been literal life or death. I remember my third day on this way of eating, walking past a pizza place where I used to stop because I love bread. I loved all these things that turn into sugar in your body. And I was like, nobody would know. And I realized, wait, first, I take a blood test every day to measure my ketones and my glucose. And second, why? Why would I ever want to eat something that's going to make my cancer stronger and my healthy cells weaker? And that's how I was able to move forward. And I have tremendous respect for people who are able to achieve this kind of way of eating that I'm adapted to now, if they have a late or early stage cancer, or they're not even diagnosed yet. And I think you touch on the most important point, where we need to make it as acceptable to eat healthily, without sugar, without alcohol, without all these inflammatory foods, as we've made it as acceptable to eat them. I mean, these days, if you go to a bar and you say, I don't want to drink, you're asked why. And it should be, why would I? Well, or maybe and the same thing with sugar.
Yeah, actually the sugar thing, the carb thing is like hilarious, where it's like someone, let's say, is like, 300 pounds, way overweight, right? And it's like people aren't really like telling them why that is, or giving them a hard time about their diet. And then these people go on a ketogenic diet, they lose 100 pounds, and then their friends are saying like, hey, it's not healthy to cut carbs out of your diet. And we've heard this from people, where it's just like, you wait a minute, I lost 100 pounds. I'm feeling better than I ever have. and now you're telling me that what I did to get here is bad for me. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. People have their own feelings around it. And the same way with cancer, I would never try to pressure anybody into taking this approach. Everybody has their own right. I just want people to know about it and to know what can be beneficial to them, and then let them make their own decision without judgment. And a big part of why Brad and I created a docuseries about this is to help educate people, just let them know the information that's out there. And to answer the really big question that I think a lot of people have is, if this is true, why haven't I heard about it before? Why hasn't my doctor told me? Because we know it's true. The evidence is there in the research. There are trials going on. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov right now and just type in ketogenic cancer, you'll get so much information. But it's not out there. And you can imagine it's difficult to market something that costs nothing. It's really easy to market something like a Viagra or a Prozac. And I'm not trying to blame pharmaceutical companies necessarily. I mean, it costs over $1 billion to run a 3-stage trial for a medication. It's going to be, how did we get to that point for something like fasting or not eating sugar?
And that's obviously the main thing, right? Like, it's like your friend you're talking about, I'm sure his doctor didn't mention to him that, eating less sugar could be helpful for cancer. Usually oncologists are extremely worried about something called cachexia, which is like a muscle wasting that usually happens very late stages in cancers. But they're so paranoid about this because they feel like if they tell you to eat a certain way and you get cachexia, well, then they can be liable. Right. And so this idea of, is just sort of from oncologists, it's just eat what you normally eat. They don't want to get into the diet at all. And even if they kind of have heard tangentially about a ketogenic diet. So
I'd even add that in some cases, some doctors don't have hope and they just want their patients to be happy.
This is true too.
Eat whatever you want. Eat whatever makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really it's so unfortunate. It's such an interesting situation. It's so unfortunate, right? Like, we need billionaires to put up the $1 billion for these kind of clinical studies that can prove this stuff, right? But again, there's no incentive for a company to do it. And when when you look at the doctor side, I mean, I'm incredibly amazed how many people go to doctors for any kind of issue, and the doctor doesn't even ask them what they're eating, what their lifestyle, what they're putting in their body. It's just absolutely incredible that no one's asking this. I personally would find a new doctor if you go to a doctor and they don't ask you what you're putting in your body. But it's the other thing is, if you think about it from a doctor's side, right? It could potentially, you're in a situation where, however many percentage of people normally don't make it, right? And now, doctors get sued a lot, right? For malpractice or for this or that, right? So they're probably thinking, well, if I give them this advice that's not the normal protocol of what we were taught in medical school, and there's a 70% chance or whatever the percentage is that they're not going to make it, are they going to try to sue me after? Am I going to have a malpractice lawsuit? And so I think in many cases, they're probably just playing it safe.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. No one goes into medicine not wanting to help people. These doctors want to help people, but their hands are tied by a litigious society and the bureaucracy of the hospitals they're in. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's what I should premise that though by saying that I am friends with some very good doctors who the first thing they do is say the same kind of things, go on some sort of cleanse, detox, plant-based, whatever the protocol is, a ketogenic, so we're not, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there's many doctors that are, doing what we say.
Yeah. And quite honestly, we're very sympathetic to doctors. We don't feel like doctors are the ones that need to be thrown underneath the bus, right? Like it's a systemic problem, right? And the doctors just are functioning within that system. So I know we have a tendency to sort of blame the doctor because they're like our frontline or first contact,
the messenger.
They're kind of the messenger. So that you want to sort of, to them, they're the face of this whole giant system, but they really don't have much control. And so the way that, if for people that are interested in this, you basically have to like learn about it a little bit yourself and then search out an oncologist. A lot of people get like a second oncologist, actually an online metabolically informed oncologist that understands what's going on. And so that actually can help take the pressure off of your on. If you like, let's say you can't switch doctors because of your insurance, say, right? Yeah. So then your main doctor, that takes the pressure off of them. And this other oncologist on the side can help coach through, eating and fasting and off-label drugs and that kind of stuff, because that's what they do for, basically for a living. So there are ways to work within the system.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, I do want to get to your docuseries and maybe some of the learnings that people can get from that. And I'm sure everyone's going to want to check that out as well. Real quick, before we get into that, I did want to ask, because you made a really good point about there's been a keto fad diet, right? Where, people are, buying keto snacks that have, 10 grams of sugar alcohols per serving and all sorts of other, and I would assume that, and you mentioned that you went plant-based, kind of a plant-based keto style diet for the year that, when you kind of healed yourself, which makes a lot of sense. I do hear a lot while I'm not personally plant-based. I have heard in situations of cancer of people doing fasting and going plant-based, but also it has to be plant-based, right? So there's the wrong way to do keto, right? If you're just eating, bacon and cheese and butter all day, right? That's probably not the healthiest way to do keto. And there's so many like keto snacks and keto desserts and all this kind of stuff. That's just the wrong way to do keto. At the same time, many years ago when I tried being vegan, I remember going to like Subway and buying like a foot-long sandwich with like some lettuce.
Oreos are vegan.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's like, I'm basically eating a foot long of bread, or, you could have vegan cookies or all this kind of stuff. And that's just going to cause inflammation in the body. So I think the key theme is looking for how to lower inflammation in the body. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, why you chose plant-based keto and how did that work out for you?
Well, I want to emphasize, like I said at the beginning, there is definitely no one way of eating that's right for everybody. Plant-based tends to really not be right for a lot of people. And I do want to differentiate between plant-based and vegan. My plant-based diet was about 5 to 10% animal-based proteins, which were pasture-raised organic eggs and wild-caught fatty fishes. But for me, just knowing my genetics and keeping track of my metabolic markers, specifically my blood sugar and my blood ketones, I could see that whenever I ate any animal protein, my blood sugar would spike. And there is something called gluconeogenesis that is sugars that are created from protein. It's thought not to be demand driven, meaning you can eat as much protein as you want. It shouldn't raise your blood sugar, but it does mine. And, I've looked at my SNPs, all of this. And so just really emphasizing that it's not right for everybody. But for me, it was right because of my reaction to animal protein and also my history. I was born and raised a vegetarian. I practiced yoga. Ahimsa is the idea of nonviolence towards other living things is important to me. And so that's where it was right. And really, I've learned a lot since then about the difference between animal products and actual natural things that our ancestors were eating a long time ago. And I look at a lot of the studies and I can't tell whether they say that a certain way of eating with a lot of animal products is causing cancer because these are processed factory animal products or if they're real. And so for me, just having that ambiguity out there, even though I have ideas about what I think it is, I just like to rely on the studies I know about. And the things about plants are pretty certain. We do eat more animals now. We just make sure they come from a very reliable ranch that we can visit, that, there are absolutely no pesticides, no hormones, they live on the land, all of that kind of thing. So I would recommend to anybody looking for a specific way to achieve a state of ketosis is maybe consult a nutritionist who can do a nutrigenic biome test. Definitely keep track of just how you feel yourself and keep track of your bloods, things like that. Again, lots of people become healthy on just a vegan plant-based diet of their own. I sometimes wonder how much of that is just cutting out the sugar, cutting out the processed food, cutting out seed oils. And I think two things that all doctors, anybody in the health profession can agree on is nobody needs more sugar and nobody needs more processed food. And if you just get rid of those two, and I think that is universal, you're going to be 90% of the way there, and then you can pick on the rest.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Yeah. And one thing recently that's kind of unfortunate is because, like we mentioned this, there was a big keto fad, right? There was I think it was probably 5 years ago, a number of books came out about the keto diet. People were doing, like, I remember going to like my daughter's soccer game, and I hear people talking about the keto diet. 2 minutes later, I see them eating potato chips or something. So they clearly didn't fully understand it. But just like you hear just people out there that are not really health conscious talking about, oh, keto, I'm going to go keto or something like that. Unfortunately, recently, the actually search volume for keto related stuff has gone down recently. Like I kind of monitor things that are trending and going up and down, and keto search volume, on the internet has actually gone down, which is interesting. And it seems like a lot of the people even who wrote some of those keto books are now saying, like, oh no, carbs. I think there's a little bit of a distinction here too, right? There are people who are like extreme athletes, or, training for like, training 3 hours a day, things of that nature for some certain sport or athletics or things of that nature. And, and they're like, no, you need carbs. And then, the person who's sitting on the couch all day, who's, not exercising on a regular basis, is saying, oh, well, so-and-so, is an extreme athlete, and he says carbs are good, so I'm going to, eat more carbs. And again, we should also distinguish what type of carbs, right? Are they fried foods? Are they, processed foods? Or are they, a natural, plant-based kind of carbs as well? So there's a lot of distinctions to be made there.
Yeah.
So individual.
I was going to say there actually is a pretty recent paper. It came out this summer that you can find on PubMed by Tim Noakes and Andrew Kutnick. They put 10 extremely successful athletes, high-end athletes, through 30 days on a carbohydrate-heavy diet and 30 days on a fat-heavy diet with low carbs. And there was basically no loss of performance across the two diets. In fact, I can't remember there was one thing that they measured where they actually did better in the fat. Maybe it was endurance. I can't remember off the top of my head. But this idea that athletes have to use carbs for everything is sort of being challenged. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this either. There's a lot of athletes that are thinking that they're having later in life problems because they're taking in so many carbs, like all day, every day throughout the course of their, career, basically. And is that causing problems for them down the road? This is a little bit murkier water, but that's some other stuff that's starting to be discussed now too. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I certainly can see that. And myself, what's interesting was when I went on a lowering my inflammation diet, it was more of a keto style diet, not like super strict, but, certainly very low carb, right? And then as I started hearing all these, rumblings of people, oh, maybe carbs are better and I said, you know what, I'm going to try to put on some muscle mass. So I'm going to up my carb intake a little bit. And then all of a sudden, my hemoglobin A1C is a little higher. I get a continuous glucose monitor. I start wearing that, and I start seeing that, really anytime I eat carbs, even so-called good carbs, I'm getting spikes. And when I'm not eating those carbs, I'm not getting the spikes. So, I've now gone back to lower carb again. I haven't cut out carbs completely. I'll still put some organic wild blueberries and strawberries maybe in a smoothie or something like that. But yeah, I'm definitely much more aware. Like I used to have this like paleo granola, that like tastes really good. It was a really great dessert, and it was like yeah. But the problem was I was having it after dinner as like my after dinner dessert, and it was spiking me regularly and spiking me throughout the whole night, and so when I wore the continuous glucose monitor, I was able to see this. And so I said, hey, I gotta look at these numbers. I gotta take action now and get ahead of this. I don't want to be, I can't be out here having a health podcast and then all of a sudden I'm have pre-diabetes or something,
Yeah. And one of the things I love about your story and how you've turned it into this movement is that inflammation is the root of so many chronic diseases, including cancer and acute diseases. I mentioned my aphasia from my brain radiation necrosis earlier, and that is completely driven by inflammation. It's gangrene in my head. I have a 3 millimeter midline shift where it's so swollen on one side, even though I have 2 tumors on one side, 2 on the other. And I'm so sensitive now to what I eat, or even a little bit of that granola. If it has sugar alcohols, it has something like that, I will feel it. I'll have a seizure. And I consider it a gift because, again, it keeps me on the right track for everything else that is dependent in my body for health.
It's like electroshock therapy. Like, no, don't touch
yeah,
that.
it really is. I can have a sweet potato every now and then. That's fine. But it's really that ultra processed food that gets me every time. And inflammation, I think, is the ultimate root. And eventually you can feel the pain that you felt. And I get the same pain from some other survivorship issues. And it's shocking how easy it is to quell that pain when you're really putting the right things into your mouth and into your body. Absolutely. You're teaching so many people.
Yeah. Well, let's tell people about your incredible docuseries and maybe what can they expect to learn, in this docuseries. Where can they find it? What's the name of it?
Yeah. I'll start with the origin story. Yeah. That it was 3 years after I was diagnosed, 2 years after I'd been no evidence of disease and cancer-free, that I was doing some coaching. I was getting so many emails from people every day, help me cure my cancer. And it's a lot for me, and especially having my life surrounded by cancer, and I want to help everybody. It was more that I could do one-on-one with people. And thank goodness Brad is an incredible filmmaker. He had over 20 years in Hollywood, and he came to me and said, I'm going to make a documentary and teach people about this. And what was originally supposed to be a 90-minute documentary, we went on the road and we talked to experts like Dr. Walter Longo, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. We have an amazing cast of 15 experts who have given their time to be interviewed for this subject. It became this series that we have now. So why don't you talk about episode 1 and then what's to come?
Yeah, and I just want to say it was more of a question, do you want to make a documentary, not I'm making a documentary?
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
We were really lucky at the time. We were in touch with a few of these people, and so we knew if we could get, we thought if Travis Christofferson and Tom Seyfried would come on board, that would be enough of a core that we could tell this story. Without them, we weren't sure we'd be able to do it. And we were very, very thankful that Travis got it right away. He totally understood what we were trying to do. And he gave Tom a call, and both of them said yes. And honestly, I think kind of once we had the two of them on board, I don't remember, maybe someone said no to us, but I really don't remember anyone saying no to us. We were really fortunate. And so, the idea behind the documentary, what we wanted to convey to people is that, as you know, even just with the ketogenic diet for other reasons, it can be really hard to just for someone to just take something, a leap of faith and just, believe it. They want to know why, why should I do this? What's the science behind it? And so that was part of what we wanted to incorporate into this documentary. Was we wanted to make it for cancer patients and for cancer caregivers. And the idea was, how do we explain to you in some simple terms that everyone can understand, from their couch, like they're watching Netflix, what's happening, how this process works, how cancer uses sugar differently than other cells. And then, how that idea came about, right? We decided to make it historical. So, just to make it entertaining and not just science, right? One of the other things that we decided to do was to not have it, there's no cancer wards, right?
And you guys will be relieved to know I'm not even in it. It's not about me. It's about the science. She's
in it extremely briefly, but it's more like watching a sort of a historical documentary or science documentary on a subject, like a Nova or something like this, right? But it's not. We watched a lot of cancer documentaries just to sort of we'll decide what kind of route we were going to take. And literally everyone starts in a cancer ward and somebody's got an IV in their arm, and it's extremely depressing. Even if it turns out good, it's
we know cancer sucks. That's table stakes.
So we just really early on we just decided that even though that's as a filmmaker, that was actually a difficult decision because I'm like, that's where the drama is, right? It's like the people, hurting is like, man, that really gets your emotions quick on screen. But we made a decision that we weren't going to include that because it's just, especially if you are a cancer patient and that's who this video was for, that's just it's so hard to watch that. So, so that's just a good thing to know if you're, going into it. And yeah, it just grew, basically. That's the other thing, is that we were trying to make like we thought we would make like sort of a 90-minute documentary talking about the science, and then tacking onto that the therapies that have grown out of this. And when we put together sort of our first rough cut, it was like 2.5-ish hours. And that was with it, like, we kind of made it bare bones, almost like what was in there. And we showed it to the people that were in the film, some, a few of the people that have donated to the cause. And we were like, hey, we kind of at a crossroads here where you see about half what we just showed you and it's 90 minutes. Or the other side is we make a multi-episode version of it, which really explains things well. And every single person was like, do the long version. Yeah. So that's how we got to be a docuseries.
But I'll summarize quickly. What you'll hear in the series is the science, why the metabolic theory is a real contender for how cancer works. There are others out there, but primarily why the somatic mutation theory, the idea that your genes control your life and it's just the flip of a coin, is not an accurate theory at this point. Like, there's so much evidence against it. And from there, we'll build out into a couple of the therapies. It's not about teaching you how to treat your cancer yourself, but it's empowering you to find the right practitioners who will help you on this journey.
I absolutely love that. And I love the fact, I really appreciate, because I'm actually very sensitive to like you said, when they show people in wards with things on their arms, like I'll change the channel, like it's because I'm very aware of what I like. I'm very protective of what I lie on my mind. I have friends who are even more so, like they won't even say the word. They'll call it C word or something like that because they're so sensitive, to it and not wanting to like so I really appreciate, the fact that you're doing that, because you do want to. This is about giving people hope. It's not about, scaring, because what people, the images, the belief system, the placebo effect, whether you believe you can heal or not, right? I think one of the biggest shames is when a doctor actually tells someone you only have so long to live, right? Versus what, I sometimes think, well, if they told someone you have a year, what if they told you had 10 years? Like, who do you think would live longer? The person who was told they have 10 years or the person that have 1? That's a very controversial subject. There's not, I don't have a lot of data.
It's controversial.
I always say, listen to your doctors, but don't listen to when they say you're going to die.
Right. So yeah, really appreciate that. So right now, people can find this on YouTube, I believe, right?
It's still in production. So episode 1 has been doing the festival and awards series. It's done really well. You can look it up on IMDb. But there's more information at cancerrevolution1r.film. And that has synopses of the planned series. Everything has already been recorded. It's just in the editing stage right now. And we actually just finished a sneak peek limited premiere of episode 1 and some bonus footage. And we may be having another batch next year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the plan right now is we're going to try and get episode 1 up as soon as possible. That's so people can look at that, and it's been around in some places. You could, like Maggie said, some film festivals and some conferences that we've been at. So we're trying to not wait until it's completely done. That's kind of we just want to share it, and get it out there. So if you go to that cancerrevolution.film, there is a place where you can sign up for our newsletter. We're not giant spammy newsletters, but if you just want to be the first to know about it, we'll definitely update people with that newsletter. And then as episode 2 comes out, the plan is then 1 and 2 are out. Just kind of keep doing that. And we are just kind of a small crew, and so definitely. there's that sort of idea of like why is it taking a little while to make 4-hour docuseries? But we're actually doing pretty good based on the crew we have and the funds that we have. We're actually cruising along really well, and very happy with the quality, which we feel is very important. We didn't want to rush and just sort of get something out there. There's already a ton of videos, by the way, of like all the people that we interviewed talking about this. You can go and see Dr. Thomas Seyfried. You can see Travis Christofferson. If you can see all kinds of doctors, Nisha Winters, right? This information isn't new, or, it's just sort of repackaged into a much more palatable and easier to understand way. So
Amazing.
For those who want to wait, we're hoping PBS once the first 3 episodes are done. And we've already had 2 professors committing to teaching this in their university classes. As a way to communicate it in a way that their students will understand.
Last week, we just had another professor reach out to us. So there's definitely going to be some educational uses for it. One of the things that's interesting in the documentary is we talk about the sort of historical and political reasons for how cancer paradigms change, or not just cancer, but scientific paradigms change over time. And so, like, there's one of the people wants to use it just specifically for that. They're not interested in cancer at all. They're just like, they loved the fact of like how it explains how science works as it goes from like generation to generation. So that's kind of cool.
Very cool. Very cool. So it's spelled like cancer evolution. It's cancer revolution, but with one R. So it's kind of spelled like cancerevolution.film is a website.
Exactly.
.film. Yeah. Cause it's a revolution and an evolution, we thought. So
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And our YouTube and Facebook, Instagram handle is Cancer Evolution Doc, as in docuseries, and X now, previously Twitter, is Cancer Evolves. And that's really the message we're just trying to communicate, is that there's so much, it's such an institutional dogma that the genetic theory is the only way now, is all we're going to research. And we want to say it's not. We don't have to commit to that. Cancer evolves. All research evolves. That's what science is.
Yeah. One quick point is that if you go to medical school today, the genetic mutation theory of cancer is taught to every medical student, but it's not taught as a theory, which it still is. This is, that cancer is coming from genes is not proven. And Maggie and I are not trying to say that it is incorrect. Maybe someday it will be proven. I don't think so, but it's possible.
And not if you look at the evidence today.
But it's just there's a lot of evidence against it. But it's just really interesting that we've heard from a lot of patients. They go to their doctor and they're like, hey, well, there's this other idea of how cancer forms. And doctors are like, well, I was taught in med school it happens this way, not like this is one way it could happen. So this is very interesting, like the way that, again, back to like how science works, how, makes its way out. And we've basically decided that this is the way cancer forms before we actually proved it. And now we've been trying to find drugs and therapies that fit the model that we decided was correct before we proved it was correct. And I think that kind of explains how we've gotten to where we are, right?
Not only is it tragic that we don't have the drugs that we expected because this theory doesn't hold water, but it's also so disempowering to be told that, oh, just bad luck. You're one of the unlucky ones, and now you're going to die. Like, we have to remind people that they have agency, that they have some control over their own health. And we're not saying we know any theory or why things form. I just know that it's not bad luck. I know there are things a person can do. Even that means just changing their mindset and how they're enduring this journey.
Yeah. Just to hit home on that genetics, there's only 5% of cancers that are actually inherited. So that's really pretty low. And even amongst that group, there's no one gene that you can inherit from your parents that 100% means you will get cancer. None of it. There's not a single one. There's one or two that kind of put you over the 50% chance of getting cancer, and then the rest are less than 50%. So this idea that your cancer, is coming, from your genes, is not necessarily, it just sort of becomes part of, what we all think, because, we're not all studying science, right? So it's just very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very, I think, detrimental. First of all, I'm very happy that epigenetics, this new kind of evolving field of epigenetics is I don't know, at least maybe it's just in my mind, maybe it's just in my YouTube feed, all this stuff about epigenetics, but hopefully more and more people are learning about it. I read the book, The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton.
Lipton was at our summit we just finished. He's amazing.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. And it's so clear to him. And when you hear him explain it as well in that book or in, I'm sure at your event, it's just so clear that like genes are not your destiny, right?
Yeah.
It's like you have control. Epigenetics means that you can influence your genes, right? I mean, and even many times when people say, oh, it's genetic, I think there's so much fear. It could be, I've done a lot of studies as well. Like I've read a lot of research about, psychology and the placebo effect and the mind-body connections and how your beliefs affect certain things, right? It's like, if you believe that because your parents got, a certain disease and then that you're going to get it and you don't do anything differently, right? A lot of times it's like, well, maybe it's because you were eating the same foods as them or living the same lifestyle or maybe something like that, if anything else. But if you completely change that and change the influences and the inputs to your genes, so I think it's very important. And I actually tried to do some work recently on someone very close to me whose parents passed away from cancer when they were very young. And I had to say, like, look, that means nothing to you. I'm trying to really get this through to your head. This means nothing. There's so many studies about epigenetics, this evolving field right now that's just proving that just because your parent had something doesn't mean, because, they started feeling a little ill on something, which ended up turning out to be nothing. But then what happens? This fear cycle kicks in. What if it's that? What if I can't be around for my kids? And so this cycle of fear and this limiting belief system of your genes or your destiny, that limiting incorrect belief system is very, very detrimental. So I'm just so happy that you're putting this out.
You're speaking my language. It's so true. It's just changing that mindset.
Doctors now, when you go in, they're like, well, what's the family history? Right. And I've become actually pretty reluctant because no one in my family has gone ketogenic. They know what we're doing and they'll listen to us, but they don't. There's no impetus, right? Like, I mean, it's like if, Pizza Hut's still working for you, that you don't have a reason to change a lot of times. And so, my parents, don't eat that way. They do have, some of them do have some health problems, I should say, actually. But it's just very interesting when I go into the doctor and they're like, well, what's running in the family? And I'm like, well, what's running in the family isn't running in me. So, yeah.
And I get into arguments with my oncologist about the placebo effect, where he doesn't believe that a lot of the lifestyle treatments, he can't explain why I'm alive still and why I've been alive the last 4 years. But he knows that the things I do are against his beliefs or his words. And I explain it doesn't matter because they're my beliefs. And you learned about the placebo effect when you were in medical school. I know you did. And so if I believe it, that should be enough.
Yeah. And that's actually probably the most frustrating thing we feel like with what we're doing is doctors just don't want to hear this. Like most doctors, most oncologists, right?
It's just, our experience of my 9 oncologists.
Yeah. Well, and then when we talk to people too, we talk to other cancer people that have, followed the route that Maggie followed. And they're like, you would think that if you had, 1 out of 100 patients or I don't know, 1 out of 10, whatever it is that's doing keto and they're, making, a recovery, you would want to know what they did. Like, what did you do different? And they don't. Right. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, Brad and Maggie Jones, thank you so much for sharing this information. I'm really happy and excited that you're putting this out into the world. Please let me know when it is released, and you already have some kind of things on your YouTube channel, right? Some things.
There's a lot on YouTube. Yeah. I mean, not to plug the YouTube, but I mean, if people want to look at more, that we have a lot of clips on YouTube. And then one thing that we're actually really proud of that we've been doing on YouTube is these cancer thrivers that we've been discussing. People who have used metabolic therapies to everyone uses it differently. Some people have used it in conjunction with standard of care, like Maggie. Some people have just decided not to do any standard of care and have only done keto and fasting. So it really runs the gamut between, one and the other. But I think we have about 25 people up there right now. We have a whole bunch of more in the can that we're still, always updating. And so if you're a newly diagnosed cancer patient, or if you're trying to help someone and like learn more about this, it's become a really useful tool because you can get it right from other cancer patients. You can go and watch a YouTube video where some of them are just people, doing a testimonial into the camera, and some of them are like little interviews that we did with people. So it's a little bit different, but just this idea of what they did and giving cancer patients hope. It's one of our favorite things that we have up on YouTube, and one of the ways that we're helping people that I'm really proud of.
Just finding the hope.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that's Cancer Evolution Doc is your YouTube handle?
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I know people don't like to wait for things to come out. They want to learn more now.
Well, and some cancer patients can't wait. So the faster we can get things out, the better.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this incredible information. And I hope that we could do it again soon. Maybe once everything's officially released, we'll come back on and do it again.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, honestly, if you're watching this even just a couple of weeks after it came out, I think episode 1 is going to be up for you. So go check it out.
Perfect. Yeah, I think by the time this is released, then your first episode will be out at least. Very good.
Sounds
Excellent.
Great. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.